So it should be recording. You should all receive the consenting. And then also too, you'll have some time at the end of the presentation to ask questions. So hold your questions after the presentation. Okay, so let's get started. So first off, I'd like to introduce myself and introduce the team that will be presenting today. So my name is Azalea Camacho. I'm the Archivist and Special Collections Librarian.
I'm Jamie Zeffery. I'm the Digitization Projects Assistant in Special Collections.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Acosta. I'm Special Collections and Archives Student Lead.
Okay, so now we'll go over the project overview. So the Pandemic Diaries project was organized by the University Library Special Collections and Archives, where we all work, the three of us work. And it aims to create an archive of digital diaries that captures the narratives of the experiences of our campus community during the COVID-19 pandemic. We encourage members of our campus community to document their personal experiences and contribute their diaries to the university archives. This project will help us better understand how we as individuals and a collective community are experiencing the pandemic. These materials will be preserved in the university archives, providing future researchers with firsthand accounts of this historic event. The recording of these digital diaries also serves as a source of healing, empowerment, and solidarity. So as an archivist who works for a university, it's my job to capture historically significant events that affects the campus community, especially students. These collecting efforts are not new from various organizations, especially with COVID-19. I'm sure you've seen the LA Public Library do things, other USCs, and other institutions collecting in COVID-19 materials. But this project is, the idea behind this project is to capture the student experience in the campus community through the form of oral history. So we're looking more for digital diaries, so audio and video. So not necessarily photos or artwork or poems or those types of things, but more audio and video diaries. And this will be, so it's just a better way to capture those experiences. And so why digital diary? As we developed this project, we thought a digital diary would be a great format to capture the experience as we're living through this experience, as students are living through this in an oral history type project. Because oral history projects are a powerful tool for meaningful learning about a person's experiences. Interviews often reveal personal, social, economic, or cultural factors that affect a person's experiences, perspectives, and identity. However, this is a non-traditional oral history project, which does not include an interviewer. This is pretty much a self-guided interview where students answer questions and cover topics they would like to include about their experience. It is also a take on how we currently share our experiences on social media by creating videos, sharing our thoughts and perspectives. It also serves as a form of self-expression, as I mentioned before, and reflection, sort of like journaling. And it also provides a sound portrait of picture of what we are experiencing for researchers, in the future. This project enables the campus community to share their stories in their own words, with their own voices, through their own understanding of what is happening and why. By preserving these digital diaries, the voices of our students and the campus community will endure to speak for them when they are gone. And just to tell you a little bit more about what we have so far in the collection, this project was established in spring 2020. So that's when our collecting efforts started, where participants or the campus community can submit. We currently have over 100 diaries so far. And this is an ongoing project. So we're continuing to collect pandemic diaries probably for a while. There's no deadline. And we have 100% student participation. So all of the diaries that we have are from students. And this is due to the fact that there's a lot of interest from faculty to include it as a course assignment or extra credit. However, since the project when we first initiated it was to capture the whole campus community, so faculty, students, local community of Cal State L.A., we're expanding our outreach efforts to capture other experiences. So we recently began a collaboration with Dr. Ali Tayeb in the nursing department to capture and highlight the stories of healthcare professionals in Los Angeles and how they're experiencing COVID-19. And we are also in talks with Dr. Don Dennis from the History Department and Project Rebound and the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership to capture the stories of incarcerated people and how they're experiencing COVID-19. So those are some of the things that we're looking into to expand on this project. But for now, we're really focusing on highlighting the student experience, the Cal State LA student experience during COVID-19. And this collection, like all of our collections and special collections, should align with our mission and vision. And this one in particular really aligns with our mission and vision to help support the discovery, learning, and engagement goals of the university by identifying, acquiring, preserving, and providing access to primary source research materials for enduring value. But what's really important and what I want to point out about our mission and vision at Cal State LA Special Collections is we really want to capture the diverse lives and historical narratives reflected in our heavily first-generation student body and the major contributions their communities have made to the dynamic cultures of Southern California. So this collection is right in line with that mission and vision. And just if you're interested in knowing some of the topics that have been covered so far in the pandemic diaries that we've collected, a lot of students talk about being first generation and that experience during COVID-19. Racial and social inequality. They talk about mental health concerns. They talk about culture and diversity, their family life, and adapting to the virtual learning environment. So now I'd like to send it over to Jamie, who's a digitization projects assistant, and she'll talk about the submission process.
Yes, thank you. So to submit a pandemic diary, you need 3 things. You'll need an audio or video recording, preferably no longer than an hour, and we accept MP3, MP4 formats. You'll need a transcript of that recording. We prefer a Word document, not a PDF if it can be avoided, since we'll need to review it later. And then a signed deed of gift. So the first 2 items that are materials that students create, and the third is a form that will need to be filled out that's available on our website. So the website is as seen here on the slide, and I'll also drop it in the chat for your access. And I'm gonna take a look at that website. Let me open it up. Okay, so here's the website that we've created for it, and it has all of the basic project information that you'll need to participate. And what we've done is we've included all of this information into a packet, a project packet that is downloadable from this website and includes that deed of gift that will need to be signed. So looking at that packet, again, it has the same information that's available on the website. So it's got the basic project information and what's included in this packet. And this blue button here is the submission link. So it's available in both places, but this packet you can keep on your own and it will help guide your recording. But let's take a look at some of the other documents. So the first one is an infographic version of instructions for recording your diary. We include information like how to prepare, like by selecting and stabilizing your device and finding a space with limited noise and good lighting. What to do during the interview, like making sure to introduce yourself. And because of the nature of this project, we've included a note about personal health information, to be aware of it, to not disclose it, and specifically in terms of others, like your family members. You can choose to reveal any details about yourself, but just remember that they will be publicly accessible down the line. So the next page are questions to help guide your story. You can state the questions and answer them like a traditional interview. You can respond to them in more of a narrative format, and you can even deviate from these questions if they do not accurately represent your pandemic experience. Just tell us what your story is. The next page is a checklist of those 3 items that you'll need to submit to us to make sure that you've got everything ready. And here we include a tip about the transcript that you'll need to submit. We recommend using a program called Otter, which is a free app and website that you can use, upload your recording, your video or audio recording, and it will transcribe it for you as best it can and provide you with a text document. We recommend copying and pasting this into a Word document to submit. And then, of course, the third item is a signed deed of gift, which is the last page in this packet. This deed of gift essentially donates your materials to the archives. It states that you are the sole creator and thus the only owner of the rights of these materials, and that you'll maintain your rights even after you donate them to us. But you're granting Special Collections and Archives a non-exclusive license to both display and publish your materials online and in physical displays and exhibits. So once you've got this form filled out, you've got your transcript and your recording and you're ready to submit, you'll click on this blue button and that will take you to our submission page. So we have opted to use Google Forms to collect your materials because it does not have as big of a limit on file sizes. And as archivists, we of course want the biggest, best, highest resolution files that we can get. So we're using Google and we're going to ask you for some basic information to help process your submission. And I just want to note really quick that we are asking for an email address here. And because you will be maintaining the copyright ownership in your materials, it's possible that at some point in the future we'll need to contact you to request permission. So please give us a personal email, not a school one that will expire after you graduate. We'll be collecting other information to process, including your name, your city of residence, your occupation, what device you use to record, and whether or not this is for a class assignment, so we can make sure that you get credit for it. We have another statement here about that personal health information, just acknowledging that you understand there may be some sensitive information about yourself and you did your best to not include information about others. And then the submission. So you will upload all of your materials all at once and tell us what you're submitting, and that will come directly to us. I'm gonna stop sharing. Can you share the presentation again, Azalea, please? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
give me a second.
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So after you submit your recording to the archives, we will begin the process of archiving the materials to make them available. And as Azalea mentioned, you know, we received over 100 diaries between spring and fall of last year. And this processing work is done almost entirely by students, student assistants, interns, volunteers, and has been the second largest source of remote work that we've been able to make available to students during the pandemic. Processing tasks include streamlining file names, describing materials by creating titles, descriptions, and selecting keywords, and reviewing transcripts for accuracy and breaking them down into chapters. So just a quick shout out, first of all, to our students and all of the amazing work that they've done on this project. And we'd like to note that, you know, we're almost always taking volunteers and people who are interested in learning about the archives, but a number of our student assistants are actually graduating this semester. So we will be hiring quite a few of them over the summer. So if you're interested in archives, please keep an eye out for that in the coming months. One last slide, please. Okay, so ultimately the long-term preservation of these stories is incredibly important, and we plan to make them available as part of our oral history collection on our digital exhibit platform, Omeka. So this platform is still kind of in the works, but to give you an idea of what it might look like, here is an oral history from the Out South oral history collection from the University of Kentucky. And you can see that it's been broken down into chapters, and there's a little toggle on the right-hand side between index, or the chapters page, and the transcript. So it has all of the elements that our students are working on to make these available to future generations of researchers. But more than that, our goal is to contribute to the historical record. You know, just anecdotally, while working on her PhD, one of our colleagues was conducting research in the archives about the influenza pandemic of 1918 a few years ago, and found almost no records of how her community experienced it. So these materials are not only important for research and scholarship, but as archivists, we know that the historical record has consistently omitted the lives and experiences of BIPOC communities, and it is our hope that this project will begin to bridge that gap. And I will toss it to Jocelyn.
Thanks, Jamie. But then, what I wanted to talk about here just really quickly before we go to Jocelyn is that though we're collecting these materials, and a lot of archives and special collections, they focus on collecting efforts, but we also at Cal State L.A. and Special Collections really want to focus on highlighting these materials through programming and events. So, and within the library, we like to do that. So we have a couple of things in the works that involve student participation, as Jamie mentioned, where a lot of our students work. Jocelyn, who's here today, is also creating and curating a virtual exhibition with the Pandemic Diaries project to highlight some of them. So let's go ahead. Now we'll go over to Jocelyn.
So the 2020 Experience Impact of COVID-19 on Cal State campus community exhibit will virtually launch on May 4th. This exhibit was curated by students assistants at Special Collection Archives. We hope to capture a moment in time of students' experience during the pandemic and the community around them. Our exhibit uses some of the pandemic diaries sent by students, so we are hearing their stories. As we know, there was quite a few things happening in 2020, like in California, we had earthquakes, fires, but our focus was what our students experienced during this time. So some of our topics will include virtual learning, their community, impact of COVID-19, and student success. This exhibit hopes to highlight on community empowerment, personal struggles, and life stories of Cal State L.A. students. My overall experience, I enjoy listening and reading students being able to connect with their families, and even mention talking to their parents or grandparents on their stories of coming to the United States. This is my first time working on an online exhibit, so the preparation is quite different from doing exhibits on campus. So sometimes students assistants at Special Collection Archives, we work on exhibits in the library or within our reading room. So this is such a great opportunity to be part of. We all know that we are part of an historical moment in time. So just to try to capture these moments is important, especially the Cal State L.A. community and what students are going through. So we can move on to the next. So we are going to show 2 examples of some pandemic diaries submitted by students. As Jamie and Azalea mentioned, that we do have a combination of audio and video submissions. So the first one is by a student named Amanda Barajas. So she talks about her family and the struggles of finding a space at home and trying to get work done. Barajas shows the difficulties of the new norms that we are dealing with during the pandemic and how to find a balance in it all. So we can play.
As far as my family goes within COVID-19, it's also changed our dynamics a bit. The start of COVID-19, I was working from home, as well as my older sister. My dad has always been out on the field with his job, and he continues to do so. Both my sisters have found new jobs during the pandemic. So that's new. And then my mom and I are the ones who are usually home now with my 3-year-old niece. My workspace, if you want to call it that, if you ever was in my kitchen. And so it was always noisy and had my little niece telling me to play with her. My mom was in a separate room that had a lock. Sorry, her mom was in a separate room that had a locked door, so she had a lot less distractions than me when she was working home. My dad was in another room sleeping because he takes naps during the day since he works like late evenings and nights. And then my mom would use another room to put the baby down to sleep or for her naps. It was at one point this semester, it was too overwhelming with the distractions and led me to not produce work I was capable of doing, and I was falling behind. This was not like myself, so I knew I had to make major changes. So I moved my workspace to my garage, where I am right now, so I can be alone and where it was a lot more quieter. Although this had its upside and a downside. I was able to focus more and get on track again, but I was taken away from the time I would communicate or spend time with my family.
So the second one is from Chun. He talks about the negative way that COVID-19 affected him. So he talks about how because of the closure and the restrictions in school campus, he wasn't his project for that he was doing for engineering was canceled. So Chun shows us some challenges of virtual learning where they cannot get the experience that is required for their studies or major in a virtual environment.
COVID-19 somehow affected my daily life in both positive and negative way. For my school and work, pandemic affected me in negative way, while positive way when talking about my family. I remember the first time the California governor announced stay-home order. My school is converting to an online meeting, which made my academic process to be more challenging. Every time I had questions, I would be able to get answer until the next day. And the most painful experience is the only project that I could help build with my team was canceled due to school restriction of COVID-19.
So these are just examples of what will be included in our exhibit. There are other topics, as I mentioned earlier, that will be part of our exhibit. So you'll be able to find more information about our exhibit either through our Special Collection Archives website or the library. This will be posted soon, so don't worry if you don't see anything right now. Thank you.
So as Jocelyn was mentioning, some of the upcoming events, which is, this is all related to COVID-19 or Pandemic Diaries. So we are doing a workshop in April, in early April, so April 7th from 11 at 11:30 a.m. to go. It'll be a little different than this session. It would be more talking about how to capture your own story, how to video or record yourself, and also going through the submission process. We do have options for people to remain anonymous. So if students don't want to, or the campus community does not want to reveal who they are or want an audio, we're going to go through some of those options with them in that session. And that should be posted up on our library website, on our calendar and through our social media outlets. And then the student virtual exhibit that was curated by Jocelyn and a couple of other special collections and archive student assistants. We're going to have a launch of that on May 4th, 2021, and that will be 5 p.m. So they'll do a virtual walkthrough of their exhibit and talk about their experience as students creating this and then working with the Pandemic Diaries project. And then we have a healthcare professionals virtual exhibit and interview series, which is also going to tie into COVID-19. in the Pandemic Diaries project, where we're trying to capture the experiences of healthcare professionals in Los Angeles and how they're also experiencing COVID-19 and the pandemic. And that will be towards the end of May. And another one that's not included here, which is a Food Diaries project. They just don't have titles yet. That's why, and we're still working on it. But there's a Food Diaries project that is also really closely tied to COVID-19, since people are staying at home and doing a lot of cooking. There's some food diaries that we're capturing with Professor Dr. Julie Fun with her class. And those are snapshots and videos of like the cooking process and comfort foods, which ties also with the whole COVID-19 Pandemic Diaries project, which we're collecting in. So these are just some of the upcoming projects. I know we don't have like the Zoom and the dates set yet, or well, we have a date set, but not the actual flyer for it, but look out for that on our social media and also for our library website. We'll make sure that the campus community knows about these upcoming events. And then thank you so much for joining us. Here's our contact information. Again, my name is Azalea Camacho. I'm the Archivist and Special Collections Librarian. And there's my email if you have any questions or concerns or want to know more about the Pandemic Diaries project, upcoming events, ways to collaborate. And also Jamie Zeffery, Digitization Projects Assistant, her email's there. And also Jocelyn, who's Special Collections and Archive Student Lead. And then now we can open it up to questions. Let me stop sharing. Is there any questions or anything that you all have? No?
I have questions, yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay.
It's awkward on the Zoom to know.
I know.
if it's or not, so first of all, thank you. This was really great. I know it's a small attendance, small audience today, but I hope you can use this recording for the website for informational purposes.
Yes.
It is very useful. Hopefully it'll be useful that way. And you know, there will be a ripple effect. So I'm the chair of liberal studies. Yes. And I will promote this for classes in the summer and the fall. Hopefully we'll have some faculty that want their students to do this as an assignment. But so again, thank you for the work. It's a wonderful project. In general, Jocelyn and Jamie, you're so lucky to be working on this project. I wish our students could get involved, and hopefully they can in the future. So questions and comments. I mean, this is a great project because something like this hasn't happened on our planet for 100 years, since the influenza epidemic of 1918. So the work you're doing is very important. What, you know, among all the stories, and you see the patterns of things people talk about, what was the most significant for you, and for any one of the three of you, in terms of what you learned about people's experiences of this whole of the whole pandemic?
I guess I could talk about, since I've gone through more of the diaries. One that just really stands out to me, or like kind of what I saw throughout some of the recordings I went through, is how people were talking about getting closer to their family, or that they didn't have time with their families, which at first I thought that was kind of interesting, because, you know, you would think people who live together have, like, you know, have this family dynamic, but the fact that they're expressing this, that, you know, they're glad that they're able to be with their families, is kind of very interesting within the American culture in that sense. But also there's one that really stood out, in that the way he was telling his story throughout the video was that he didn't really have a great relationship with his parents, and kind of it just through his like childhood, and then kind of at the end So it was just him and his mom living together. And during this pandemic, they actually were able to really reconnect and have this bonding experience that, you know, he never had before. So he was able to appreciate more about her and ask her stories and stuff like that. And I thought that was really such an amazing thing, because would he had this experience if it wasn't during the pandemic. So I think those kind of things really stand out in these diaries.
Yeah, and I'll just add to them. I haven't reviewed them as intimately as Jocelyn has, because Jocelyn and the students are curating an exhibit, but I have taken a look at some of them. And to me, what really stands out, and I know there's a lot of hardship that comes out in the pandemic diaries, that you hear students struggling, they get emotional when they speak about certain topics or their families or what they're experiencing. I mean, some of the students have had COVID-19 and their family, and they said that their mom had, you know, so there's some of that, of course, in there, of course. But what really captured my interest and my attention is the resilience of Cal State L.A. students, and the silver lining, and sort of the creative aspects that they take with these videos, which to me, it's like a little bit more, that's why I see this sort of like self-expression kind of where they can release and share their stories in a different way. They also do things with their videos where they create, like, one student that I can remember, she said so she can't spend time with her friends traveling. She put it at the end of her video, she put like a travel video together, kind of honoring the relationship with her friends that she had, that now she doesn't. I mean, she has it, but just not in the same way. So some of that to me really speaks to me, because we, you know, we can focus on all the hardships which our student population is facing in our campus community, but I think there's just a lot of resilience. There's like a story of resilience there that the student, also Jocelyn, and the students that are curating the exhibit, we wanted to make sure to highlight that aspect of it too. That they're, you know, these things are still happening in their communities with their families. And there's, you know, inequalities and all of these issues going around that are coming up in these pandemic diaries, but there's still like this hope at the end of the tunnel that I think it's a very Cal State L.A. kind of, you know, attitude, which is kind of what we are going to highlight in the exhibit as well. So that's something that I've kind of noticed through these diaries from the ones that I've reviewed.
The one thing I think that stood out to me, kind of to speak to your point, is the resilience and the vulnerability of people. Like we said, some of these videos are, people are really crying and they're going through a lot of stuff, and to be willing to show that vulnerability. You know, I know there was one that we were processing, and there was some concerns raised about the mental health of one of the students. Like, they were raising some red flags, and this had been months past that we were now looking at it, and we were kind of concerned about that student's welfare, and actually reached out to him just to have, or his professor reached out to his professor for her to reach out to him to make sure that he was okay, you know. And he was really thankful for having been contacted, and said that he was actually way better now than he was pre-pandemic, and that he, you know, had a new girlfriend, a new job, and just everything was going so much better for him. And just to speak to that resilience, and, you know, these are some really hard times people are going through, so we're glad to be able to record it, but also to know that they can, you know, overcome. So that was really beautiful.
And also, just to add this, because I've been working and guiding the students, Jocelyn and there's 3 other students that have been working on the virtual exhibit. Because some of the students get really emotional, there's ethical concerns that we think about, like, should we put this up? Like, you know, so that's something that we talked about as they were curating their sections, and each of their, even though they gave us the rights to put these materials up, you know, we're within our rights, but I told them to think about, put yourself in their shoes. If this is your pandemic diary, would you want to share that? And there might be other ways of expressing that versus putting the actual video up. And you might just want to talk about it within the exhibition. So those are some of the things that have come up that throughout this project that we didn't really think about when we designed the project. I mean, as I mentioned during the presentation, there's a lot of institutions collecting these materials. It's not anything new or unique. But I think at Cal State L.A. we want to pay attention to those types of things. It's come up in other collections as well, but because we're also Cal State L.A. Special Collections is very physical. Like a lot of our collections are physical, not much of our stuff is online. Until recently, we started to think about the online, making things available online because we're in this virtual environment. And it was something in the back burner, but all of these things are coming up into our heads because putting things online is different than putting things in the physical space in a physical exhibition. You're putting it up online, everyone's gonna see it. So those are the considerations that we took into place when creating like the virtual exhibit, and some things that we still kind of have discussions about amongst us with the students and also with Jamie, who works with the digital projects. And she's the only person that works with digital projects, so yeah, and special collections, so.
Yeah, and I also just want to add on that I think it's really important for like us student assistants to talk about these situations, especially with ethical situations, because it's not something that, you know, we probably would have not talked about during this pandemic, and kind of having that opportunity to think about that in the workspace. So I think this is kind of making us realize stuff that we wouldn't have before and kind of how to work with that. And I think that's kind of very important for student assistants to actually experience.
Is there any other questions?
No question for me, but just really excited about this and thankful that we have such an amazing team at the archives in our library. And I will definitely be putting a plug in my advising sessions just to see if anybody wants to do it. And then, you know, community members around, because I think the community is important, that the students also hear that they're part of something bigger, right? That they're, and I think we know that sometimes, especially right now with COVID, but it just helps to know that the house down the street from campus is experiencing something similar. And so that we are in this collective of pain and resilience. So I'll definitely be putting a plug out there.
Thanks. Is there any other questions, comments?
Sorry, I did have a question. I just saw my question.
Oh no, too late.
Where do you see this? Where do you see this going? I know this is, my mind always goes to like, how can we put this out there in a bigger stage?
Yeah.
But do you have any projects in the future, how you can use all this?
Yeah, it's kind of like some of the projects that I mentioned earlier, like the healthcare professionals, incarcerated people, collecting those types of stories as well, kind of tie in together. And it's something that happens organically. And I like when that happens because there's like this natural synergy that happens, and it's, you know, everybody involved is interested, but in kind of working and collecting these stories. But the way I see it is, Jamie had mentioned in her section of the presentation where we're trying to create this digital archive of these oral histories to make them available. We already have the platform, which is Omeka, and we're going to start. So Omeka is not only for creating virtual exhibitions, it's creating digital collections as well. So that's where these are going to live eventually, with transcriptions. And they can be used for virtual exhibitions, but I'm hoping that they can be used for different institutions, different, you know, once they're available, they're made available to the public. So yeah, we're hoping to expand that way. But as I mentioned before, we like to do things that we want to do, like with public programming and things like that, in collaboration with other institutions, to make this collection more, people more aware of them once we get them up. So that's going to be something that I probably in special collections, we'll do more outreach efforts and trying to collaborate with others either on campus or outside of the campus. But they'll exist in a digital virtual gallery or virtual repository.
Hi, I'm sorry I came late. I've been in all different Zooms and places today. I'm Associate Dean Catherine Weiss. I have a question, and that is, I think this is an amazing project, and I was just wondering if there's, and maybe this was covered earlier, but like a plan to have like a whole diary series. So this is Pandemic Diaries. Maybe next year there's a different diaries, so like a different focus, and if this is growing like that, or if this is like one project and then it's gonna be a whole different project. Like,
yeah, I mean, we haven't thought about that. I mean, originally when we thought about this is just, you know, doing what other institutions are doing. They're collecting COVID-19 stories, so we're sticking to like COVID-19. But we've been really involved with Dr. Julie Fun and oral history projects, and so that's where this whole idea of just collecting audio and video, not that we would turn away photographs or things like that, but that's more of our focus. But it definitely could turn into something different, or every semester or something like that. But for right now, it's COVID-19, but we're trying to right now we only have the student experience because professors have been providing this or including this as a course assignment or extra credit. So that's why we have more student experience, the Pandemic Diaries. But we wanted to reach out to other communities to kind of get their experience. So that's the part where we're thinking of expanding to different communities. I mean, even faculty could submit their own pandemic diary. We haven't received any of those, but but I think that might be a good idea eventually to do something to use this format, the digital diaries aspect of it, and different collecting initiatives. For instance, like collecting, Jamie had mentioned in her segment of the presentation, collecting materials of BIPOC communities. So they can express, which is usually missing in the historical record and in special collections materials. And, you know, we're at Cal State L.A., we have a diverse student population. So this has been a very effective way for us to collect those stories. So, I mean, this could provide other avenues for us to go through.
Yeah, and just to build on that, you know, we do a lot of collaborations, like we said, with Dr. Fun in the oral history classes that she teaches in Asian American Studies. And we're kind of already expanding into other areas like Chicano studies and possibly Pan-African American studies. But again, those are more traditional oral histories. They're very much the interview style. The students are interviewing, you know, community members. And it's, you know, it's covering the topics that we'd like to cover, but it's not necessarily from a student's perspective, which is equally as important, you know. So I think the idea of adapting this diary to kind of expand to students so they can record themselves in the way that they feel comfortable, in addition to those traditional one-on-one oral histories of the community members, and then maybe finding a way to kind of bridge them and create something, you know, beautiful with both of them together down the line. I think we're expanding into oral histories, you know, one way or the other. So whether or not they're diaries, they'll definitely be recorded for the historical record.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions?
I have one more.
Okay.
For Jocelyn and Jamie, what attracted you to this project, and do you see yourself doing anything related to it after college?
Well, I'm part of this project because we do the oral history collecting with Julie Fun, and we needed to pivot in spring of last year once classes became remote. So I work in the archives, and that's like where I'm working collaboratively with professors for that kind of assignments. So I kind of, you know, it was I don't want to say obligatory, but you know, it's like it had to be done. We had to find some way to adjust, you know. But I definitely think that moving forward we'll be more interested in collecting materials like this. Jocelyn?
I'm completely a different major. So from this, and my research topic is quite different from what we're doing here. But because of during the pandemic and that we had to work from home, I think the student who started kind of collaborating of working on a creation online was Bryce Van Ross, right? He kind of brought students together and tried to come up with an exhibit, and this is what we came up with. We had different ideas and stuff that we were trying to work on, so we could, I mean, I'm trying to say like, so we had work at home, but it was just kind of ways to figure out because of, you know, projects to work from home. And since we already do exhibits on campus, I mean, it made sense for students to do an exhibit online.
Is there any other questions? I think we have about 8 minutes. If not, it's okay.
I guess my timing wasn't so good.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right.
But I'm really intrigued by this project. I read the schedule incorrectly, so sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. We recorded it, so this recording will be available.
Great.
And well, if there isn't any other questions, we can. Oh, one more.
I have endless questions, so
Okay.
this will be the last one, I promise. I think you kind of touched on it, but working with this project and working with people submitting their stories and telling about powerful experiences, you know, it's validating when you know that your voice is heard. It's validated when you know that your story matters. Did you get a sense of that from the people contributing, that they felt like, I don't know what they felt like, we're all in this together, or, you know, I feel better because I shared my story? Did you get a sense of that?
I remember listening to a particular one. I think Jocelyn, you probably listened to all of them because you're creating, but there was a particular.
Not all of them.
Not all of them. Yeah, there's a particular one that
No.
I think she thanked her professor and Cal State L.A. for providing the opportunity to create the digital diary. So I think I did get a sense from the ones that I did look at that it was a way for them to self-reflect, similar to journaling or to something along those lines. So I think it does give them a way to express themselves and also know that they're not the only ones experiencing this. So it kind of gave them a way to release, and then they know that this is going to be shared. And there's a lot of talk in in my field and archives about collecting the experiences of, you know, the diverse communities. And if you see yourself in the archives, you begin to realize that what you say and what you think and how you feel is important. It matters. It's part of research, and you're creating it. So even letting students know that they can create these materials, since we are living in this current event, that's empowering. And they're talking in their own voice. No one else is interpreting it. So that's an important part of the whole aspect of it being an audio video versus just a photo that we're collecting. Especially, that's kind of what I've found in my experience, or kind of when I'm looking through these and listening to the audio, the videos and the diaries that have been collected so far. Jocelyn, did you want to?
From what I remembered, I mean, they do reflect on what's happening, and they do acknowledge that, you know, what we're going through. But I didn't see much from I only gone through a few of them, but I don't really see them. I don't know if they know it yet, but they probably know it later. Or they probably have these recordings themselves and probably look back at this. But a lot of them do say, like, you know, when I tell my kids or like future generations about this time. But I mean, it's interesting to see the ones from the spring into the fall and kind of how that's changed too. But yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you hear them talk about the presidential election, you know, talking about George Floyd, the protest. So some of that was kind of in depending on, so we started collecting in spring 2020, but some of that is reflected throughout the whole pandemic diaries that we've collected so far. And some of that will be covered in the virtual exhibit that Jocelyn and other student assistants are curating.
And I would say just in general about archival records, like they seem more important in retrospect. Sometimes you don't know what you've got until you've got context for it later. I know just anecdotally for the oral histories with the Chinese American collection that we're building, a lot of the people, in particular the women, are very apprehensive to share their stories. They feel like it's not important. No one wants to hear this. I didn't do anything significant, and they don't want it to be on record, you know, and it's like, that story is important to someone else at a later time. And, you know, to give value to what you're saying now can be really difficult based on, you know, how you were raised to see yourself and your contributions. So I'm hoping that if students don't know it now, that they will definitely know it later, how important this was.
I think also too, it'll be interesting to see the difference between these that we were getting from classes to people actually submitting themselves and see if there is kind of this difference in like expression or not. So I think that's something that it'll be interesting to look forward to with this project.
Is there any other questions? I think we only have 2 minutes left. Okay. All right. All right, great. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions or concerns or want to learn how to collaborate with us on this project or have ideas yourself, please feel free to reach out. We're always available to collaborate. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Azalea, for organizing, participating. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for inviting me.